In this episode, we use the phrase "speak your truth" to examine the objectivity of feelings. Welcome to the Bottom Turtle Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bottom Turtle Podcast. My name is Dr. Shannon Ray, and we're joined by our co-host, Oyani and How you doing, Oyani?
I'm doing okay, Shan. What up? How's your week been?
My week's been pretty good. I had a talk I had to give at the beginning of the week. Did I tell you about that?
No. Oh, no, I think you did. With your colleagues kind of explain the work you were doing or what you've been working on, right?
Yeah, I was treating the talk as an advertisement, man. I'm trying to get more people to be interested in, like, oh, yeah, I want to help you out with that.
Yeah. I can totally see that. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's a matter of just catching people up with what I've been doing, because I feel like, you know, you go off on your own and you're digging through all this space and everything makes sense to you, but you haven't communicated that to anybody. So they're all just like, you're telling them something, you're all excited about it, and they're just like, okay.
Okay. Yeah. And, you have to, make it engaging enough for, if you need any help or for people to, be eager to offer some new ideas to you or different things. Like, you want to explain this project you've been working on in an engaging enough way.
Yeah. So the talk went I think the talk went well. I was really happy with it. And actually I got invited to give a talk to my undergraduate institution. So, in March, I'll be giving a seminar over the internet.
Oh, wow. That's pretty awesome.
At Wichita State.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm pretty excited to communicate my ideas.
Yeah. I like it.
How you been? How you been doing?
I've been, working. I took on this project that, in hindsight now, it was probably a whole lot more than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But it was one of those projects that when it comes across your lab, I only saw it as an opportunity for me to improve myself.
Yeah.
That was where I was like, oh, okay, this would be an interesting challenge. Like, and then I started to dig into it, and I'm like, okay, wait, this is a little bit more involved. It's some company up in New York. They're trying to set up a mentoring program for Black creatives and people who are trying to start up businesses. So they're trying to set up events for people who want to start businesses or people who are trying to find mentors and things like that.
Yeah.
So it kind of involved a whole rebranding process, because they had a brand before that was, a little bit lackluster.
Yeah.
So they wanted me to rebrand it, and
they brought in a superhero, come fix everything
and stuff like that. Yeah. So it was interesting. And, I'm so glad that, I'm so happy rather about my approach towards my work more often than not, because I'm always open to feedback from people. I'm always primed to be okay with this is shit. Yes.
You gotta be, man.
I'm always primed to be, this is shit. Oh, okay. Why is it shit? Like, I'm not going to take that personally. I'm not, because if I do, I just will be poor. You'll
never get better at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you don't want someone to tell you that it's good when it's actually terrible. Like if you create a logo where the purpose is to program people in a specific way, and it doesn't do that, and then someone's like, oh, this is great. They're just feeding you false bullshit data. You're just going to be terrible at creating that logo.
And when you work with people who are paying you to do this, there's a whole other level of respect that you have to have for their opinions and their dreams and their ideas, because you might not agree, but it's your job as the designer or as, the developer to find that middle ground between your ideas and what you think would work.
Yeah. And
incorporating their own dreams and vision for what they wanted their business or their brand to look like.
Yeah. Because if you think about it, I mean, both of your reputations are on the line. I mean, if you just listen to what they say and they don't know anything about design and they make you turn out some shitty logo, then you're not going to want to advertise that.
I mean, sometimes you have to kind of suck it up.
Yeah.
And because you have to remember you're working with people who have, different backgrounds and different ways that they, approach solving a problem. A perfect example, a couple of years ago, when I first started out, one of the biggest projects that I got was to design a logo and branding for this guy. I don't want to give out too much details about the project specifically because it's one of those projects that you do and you're not really proud of how the work came out.
Yeah.
But you feel like, you know what? I did the best I could, man. Like, what do you want me to do? You wanted it to be this way. And, well, here you go. Here's what you wanted. And one of the biggest things was, it's interesting too, because it kind of goes in line with what we were planning on talking about today. So when you design a logo, there's something called Piccolino test.
A Piccolino test?
Piccolino test. It's like an Italian word for small. Basically, we call it the shrink test.
Okay.
So, and if you remember when we were doing our branding, it was something I kept harping on is when we shrink this down.
Yes.
What is it going to look like? I kept harping on that because it's so important. So this, client of mine, he wanted this logo. He was doing something that had to do with bits and binary. So he wanted like all the ones and zeros.
Yeah.
So I tried to explain to him that once we start to like shrink this logo down, those ones and zeros are not going to be visible because the shrink test, what it really is, what the shrink test really is saying that if I reduce the size of this logo to between 1 and 2 inches, is it still identifiable? Does it still do its job?
Yeah.
Does it still program people the way I wanted to program them if I drop it down to 1 or 2 inches?
Yep.
What that means is it kind of simplifies the process of creating a logo or branding down to you don't want it to be too complex.
Yes.
So that when you shrink it down to between 1 and 2 inches, now you don't even know what you're looking at.
And people are like squinting and there's like all this
and
detail. It's just
exact, all the detail is lost. Even sometimes when if you watch TV or movies and you see like at major events, they will have all the sponsors will have their logos in like a whole space. All the logos are all lined up together.
Yeah.
So just imagine if you have a logo that's so small, it has to sit in the middle of all those logos and nobody even knows what is that. What is that?
No, it's
they
not.
Can't even tell.
Yeah. I remember you telling me a lot of design philosophies that need to be satisfied. For instance, like it needs to look good in black and white first, and then stuff like that.
Yeah. So a lot of times when someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, I want you to make me a logo," whatever, they're not thinking about all that.
Yeah, they don't know all that.
The only thing they're thinking about is their vision, and you just have to try to find a way to make their vision right.
Yeah.
If that's the best way I can put it. And I remember this particular client, he kept harping on those ones and zeros, and I tried to tell him, not unless we want to lean very heavily into it to where it's obvious, the idea of having the ones and zeros around, because it was something with a box and a forklift. It was just going all over the place.
He's trying to put a novel on a logo.
On a logo. I'm like, bruh. And I came up with so many options that were a whole lot better. And after working on this for about a week, I just said, you know what? I'm just going to make exactly what you want for you.
Yeah.
And so you want a box? Here's a box. You want a forklift? Here's a forklift. You want ones and zeros all over the box? Say no more. Yeah. Put all the ones and zeros.
Actually, I think I remember this. Now I think I remember. Yeah. I think I know where this story is going because you told me. Okay, yeah. I know. I see what's going on. Yeah, go ahead.
And so, and it's so funny because I went back a few weeks ago to look at his website and I saw the logo on there and the exact problem I was trying to tell him.
Yeah.
Was what happened because when you go to a website, the logo that's in the corner is really small.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm like, what is this? Is it a present? What are those things? I can't. It's right there now, and it just lives on his website. I guess he's happy with it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it kind of harkens back to the idea that when you're talking about your feelings or how you feel, yeah, that's great. But what we are trying to do is we're trying to communicate with each other to where you understand what is, how do I put it? We're trying to communicate with each other in a way that your feelings are valid, yes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you should be open to the idea that, maybe, just maybe, this person actually knows what they're talking about. I should listen and try to do a back and forth to kind of find where it works.
Yeah.
Especially because it wasn't like I was saying, this is garbage, go away. I was trying to explain to him exactly why I think this won't work. Like, hey, if we do this won't work this way. And it's interesting because the world we live in today, a lot of people don't typically have an association with the truth to that point.
Yeah.
And in my line of business, there's just no way else for you to be successful if you can't put all that aside to go, this, when a client says, okay, let me see the concept you came up with, or the draft. This is the draft. This is the concept. When you present that to them, it's like you're saying, this is my truth.
Yeah.
This is how I have broken down this thing to mean. This is it. Here it is.
Yep.
And you're opening up yourself to that critique to say, you know what? Tell me how you feel about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will tell you how I feel about it. And then we can go back and forth, and then I can perfectly nail exactly what you want.
Yep.
In such a way that it will satisfy what you want, and it would at least stick to the rules, like, pass the shrink test, pass the black and white test. Like it will, we can always find that middle ground if we work hard enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually thought that this story was going to go in the direction of that time. There was somebody who, like you'll send out, you'll do your logo, and you'll send it to the client, and you give them an opportunity to look through everything to make sure it's good. And I remember you telling me a story about a guy who you sent it out, and you were like, okay, man, he needed his name and his address. He needed something. You needed some information to put on that logo. And you sent him like 5 emails telling him like, hey, man, you got to send me that information. Hey, man, I need that information. And then eventually he never got back to you. So then you're like, all right, this is the logo I'm going to put. Like, you spent all this time trying to look up the information yourself. And then so eventually.
And then I got the blame.
Yeah. So eventually you ended up just sending it to him, and he was like, all right, here's your last opportunity to look and see if it's good. And then it's like, all right, you didn't respond to me, so I get my money, I give you the logo. And then after the process was already done, he came back at you upset because you didn't do what he wanted you to do in terms of the information, like his name and address, whatever he wanted on there. And it was this situation where this guy seemed upset with you as if you did something wrong, as if his feelings of being upset with you had anything to do with the objective state of what happened in this interaction.
It's difficult because if you work in the service business, it's so difficult to fight those battles sometimes because, it's always this saying that the customer is always right. And, as much as that is not true, you don't, like, I couldn't really come out
until the guy like, hey, look, man, I have the data, I have the track of all the information of when I sent you this email, that email, this email, like this. Your feelings that somehow this is my fault are just objectively wrong. There's just like, you may feel that way, but they have nothing to do with the actual like evolution of the universe. Like you're just it's great you have all these feelings, but at the very least you just need to just accept that there is no truth to whatever it is you're feeling. Yeah, and that's kind of the focus of this episode is the idea of what is the objectivity of feelings. Like, feelings seem to be objective in the sense that everybody has them. Like, we can all observe that every human, like, when we observe how humans behave and interact, we know we have feelings. And then when we observe their behavior, we can clearly see that they have some sort of internal process to where they're probably feeling similar feelings. They're humans. But you can also see that dogs and other creatures, they all have feelings as well. And so feelings are objective in that they are a thing that exists independent of any one person or mind. But in terms
everyone
of
has
their
feelings.
Yeah, everyone and everything has feelings, but in terms of their objectivity of what the actual state of reality is, that's where you start getting hairy, because just because you feel something's true, like just because that guy felt as though you slighted him somehow, the actual hard physical data stored in your communications of the emails and stuff you're sending just suggests that his model of reality based off his feelings just has nothing to do with the actual configuration of the universe. Yep. Yeah.
And I think you had an interesting story that you had told me a while ago about a student of yours. Yeah.
This person, man. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think what's so funny is you have no idea how common this is.
Yeah. Oh,
and one of the biggest things I wonder about though is people like this, do they really believe what they're saying?
Oh, do you want me to tell the story?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So when I was in grad school, I used to teach physics labs, and the physics 2 lab was all about electronics. So connecting circuits and measuring resistance and, doing all these things. And the format of the assignments, like what they hand in to be graded, are these lab reports. And the lab reports, they have like an abstract, they have data analysis, like they have the raw data, data analysis, calculations, conclusions. These are all sections that have to be and like procedures. Like these are all sections that they have to hand in. Then I grade each section. And so I remember there was this student, and this girl, she used to complain all the time. Like when you'd walk into class, you could see her with her group. She'd always be complaining. You'd walk by her station where they're supposed to be connecting circuits, and she's just sitting there complaining about everything, like people who had done this or that to her throughout the day. And I remember she came up to me a couple times, because sometimes I'll hand the lab reports back, and I write comments as to why people missed points, but they don't always read them. And so it typically takes like a couple times where they'll get the report back. They won't look at that one. They'll get the report back again. They'll see the same issue, and then they'll come up to me and go, "Why did I miss so many points?" And for this person, she didn't hand in like 3 sections of the lab report. Like a whole calculation section was missing. There was no conclusion. There was simply nothing for me to grade. But because she always had this feeling that she's never at fault and everyone else is out to get her, she interpreted it in terms of me being like too mean of a TA and grading too harshly. And I'm thinking, that has nothing to do with me. You simply gave me nothing to grade. Yep. And I remember one time she handed in a lab report 3 weeks late. So at the university I was at, the labs were run by a faculty member. And so the faculty member set a rule that says, if you hand in a lab report 1 week late, that's 1 point off out of 20. If it's 2 weeks late, that's 3 points off out of 20. If it's 3 weeks or more, it's 10 points automatically. And so whenever I'd get a lab report that was 3 weeks late, I just write a 10 on it. Like, I'm not going to even bother grading it. You already got a 50%. You already failed. So I'm just going to write a 10 on it and hand it back because I don't want to waste my time. And so one day she was complaining again about how, oh, I know I'm going to get a bad grade on this lab report because this guy, blah, blah, blah. And I heard her complaining about it. And so when I went and handed her the lab report with a 10 on it, she throws her hands and goes, "Of course." And I'm thinking, look, like, that policy has nothing to do with me. You handed it in 3 weeks late.
And that's kind of what I was trying to say is, people like that, do they really believe what they're saying?
Man, I remember
that, like, I don't know.
Well, that's the thing, like, that it's kind of a narcissistic mentality because you are not trying to look at some sort of objective data to get where you are. You're just consistently indulging in your feelings about things. Like, she feels as though she's being treated unfairly. And so in her reality, like in her model of reality, the state of this interaction was this TA is just being an asshole. But, just because she feels that way, like I was saying before, her feelings are objective in that she feels them. They're objective in that they are telling her something about her location in the space of configuration.
Absolutely.
And as we were saying before, your model of reality is based off of your settings. Like, what are your settings? The settings of your physical system. And so the settings of her physical system are telling her what her model is. But we know that models of reality have varying degrees of fidelity to actual hard reality. And so her feelings are objective in that they're telling her location in the space of configuration, or they're telling her what her model says. But they're not objective in terms of what is the shared reality that we should be working off as being the true reality. Like, what is the shared soft reality?
It's even more obvious when you look at it from the perspective of, say, you're in the house and you're cold. And you're like, oh man, I'm feeling cold. The temperature outside could be like 85.
Yeah.
But you can still be cold. That cold feeling is no, but we're not saying it's invalid.
Yeah.
But if someone asks you what the temperature is.
Yes.
If someone actually asks you what the temperature is.
Yep.
It's 85.
Yeah. You might have
be
a flu
feeling
or something.
cold, whatever. It's 85 outside, bro.
Yeah.
That's not going to change based off of how you feel.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing about this idea. Like, that phrase, speak your truth.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know what that phrase is meant to communicate. Because I feel like, given just the phrase itself, the constraint information provided by the phrase, there are multiple plausible interpretations, but I think 2 of them are complete opposites of each other. If the interpretation of that phrase is supposed to be, you feel as though something's true. You have a lived experience, and so you have a perception of how things are. And so that is your truth, as if there is separate truths for each people, and there isn't an objective truth. You're speaking your truth. Like, that interpretation of that phrase is just a disaster. It will lead to a breakdown of shared reality and communication. It'll lead into narcissism, like that girl we were talking about previously, where they are treating their feelings as objective fact and ignoring the actual data that would suggest whether or not their feelings are valid or justified. And it's just like, it is a path to chaos. Like, for social cohesion, it's a path to chaos to encourage people to think that just because they feel something, that it's true, or that it's truth.
Yep. And this is something that is so common amongst people. I had a conversation with someone sometime last week, and it was about a movie on Netflix. And essentially, this friend of mine was upset because she felt like the movie was what's the title of the movie? It's on Netflix. It's called Nappily Ever After.
Nappily Ever After.
Yeah. Essentially, it's a movie about this woman who felt that she was being too consumed by how she looked based off of the fact, like, the amount of time she spent on her makeup, the amount of time she spent on her hair.
Yeah.
And so somewhere along the line of the movie, she came to this eureka moment where she was like, oh no, this is what's holding me back. And she, cut off her hair and went all natural with her hair, and her life became better.
Oh, I see. So
there is absolutely nothing new about this type of stories.
I'm assuming this was a black story. Yeah, because people might not know that, like, in black community, some people, they'll straighten their hair, put a perm on it to make it look straight, and then other people, like, there's a movement of people going natural, so just letting their curls.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why it's nappily ever after. You get rid of trying to straighten your hair, and then you just let it be its natural state, and now you're happy ever after. But yeah.
And my biggest challenge with this friend of mine was trying to get her to understand that, okay, you might feel like this movie was, because she basically felt like the movie was written as an attack on women who straighten their hair.
Ah, I see.
And I said, okay, I haven't seen this movie.
Yeah.
But we watched the trailer. So I saw the trailer, and then I said, okay, I haven't seen this movie, so I can't speak for the content of this movie.
Yeah.
She said she saw about 10 minutes of it, and she was so pissed off with how they constantly bashed women who straightened their hair that she couldn't even watch it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so we both watched the trailer.
Yep.
And I said, okay, so we both saw this trailer now. Based off of what you saw, based off all the information that's available from this trailer.
Yeah.
Do you think that the aim of, the writers or the producers of the show was to completely dump on women who straighten their hair? Or, I'm not saying that that's not a possibility. It might be. But do you also agree that there could just be the possibility that this could just be one person's story about how they had this unique struggle to them? And this friend of mine refused to agree that was even
possible. Yeah.
And one of the ways I understand the phrase "speak your truth" is speak your truth. That phrase gives you freedom to express how you feel.
Yeah.
But you have to be open to the idea that your feelings might just not be valid.
Yeah.
Speak your truth all day long.
Or that the state of the information is such that, you may feel like, you're taking the distribution. So we have these two interpretations of this movie. Is it a movie designed to bash women who straighten their hair? Or is it a movie where someone's just trying to communicate, like, the freedom of going natural? So these are two possible interpretations of the movie. This is kind of an example from the first episode that I think is clearer now that we can communicate it. But, there is, like, if you give this movie to every human being on the planet and you tell them to judge what they think the interpretation is, they might not just look up the other two. They might come up with a bunch of other interpretations as well. So if you take the set of all the interpretations and then just for each interpretation you tally how many people thought it was this or how many people thought it was that, what you're going to get is a distribution of the interpretation of this movie. And what you're saying is, it's like, when she's interpreting the movie, she takes that entire distribution. She takes all the other interpretations from how other people can interpret the plausible interpretations, and she sets all of it in one spot. And it's like, but wait a minute. Like when we actually polled every single person who could watch this movie, the distribution isn't just this one spot that it's definitely objectively this. It can be multiple interpretations. And once you start getting to that point where you ignore the data that, hey, there are plausible interpretations of this, and you treat one thing as fact, now you're indulging in your feelings in the face of actual objective data.
Yeah.
And so your feelings, your truth in the sense of this is the interpretation people are using, where you're saying your truth is I'm going to make this distribution where it's all in one spot. Indulging in that is just narcissistic. Can you at least admit that, hey, you may feel this way, but I can see how someone else may feel another way?
Which is, the approach that, everybody should have. And especially for me, like in my line of work, I spend quite a bit of time trying to interpret people's feelings. Because sometimes, especially new business owners, that's all they have to communicate what they want.
Yeah.
Is I want it to feel joyful. I wanted, like the product I'm working on right now, the lady was like, I want it to feel really African and really black.
Yeah.
And to someone
you're like, as a black African, I got some basis to go off of, but that's pretty damn broad.
You see what I mean? Yeah. And so somewhere along the line, when she was like kind of sending me ideas, she went and she downloaded, and this is the lady who I'm working on a project for right now.
Yeah.
And she downloaded this bunch of African symbols. I guess she just Googled African symbols.
Is she African or is she African American?
She's African American.
Oh, okay.
And
okay.
She just Googled a bunch of African symbols and sent it to me and said, yeah, can you just integrate some of these symbols into the website? And I looked at the symbols. I'm like, for one, I could identify 2 of those symbols. Again, I'm African, so I could identify 2 of those symbols. And I know for a fact, people who own those symbols, they're not going to be happy with you just tossing them on your website simply because you want to look good. But I knew exactly what she wanted.
Yeah.
So I was able to say, oh, you know what? That's what you want? Okay. So when I came, and this was after I sent her the first draft. So when I came back with the second draft, I didn't use those symbols, but I was able to incorporate a more Black culture type feel because it's based in New York. So they wanted more of like a New York feel.
Yeah.
So I was able to incorporate like, the graffiti and the New York vibe with the pictures and things like that.
Yeah.
And I completely excluded those symbols that she had wanted.
Yeah.
Typically, when this happens, when I send it over to the client, they don't even remember they sent me those symbols. She did not even remember.
I see.
She did not. Because it hit exactly what she wanted. And sending me those symbols kind of just made me say, oh, okay, I know what you want. Say no more.
Yeah.
And I think feelings are so important and we can get a lot of useful data from it.
Yeah.
But we should always be open to the idea that, hey, look, man, I might be feeling whatever it is I'm feeling, but there might just not be enough objective truth in what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
I should be open to listening to other people's contradictory information or data to kind of update myself. You don't want to be lost, man.
Yeah.
I say this like every week.
Yeah.
You don't want to be lost.
And that's the thing. When you say be lost, like the actual, like objectively, like we've already said that feelings are objective in the sense that they are a thing that minds have that are independent of any given mind. Like, I mean, all humans have them, and even things that aren't human, but they're also, if you think of the mind as being like a subsystem, like the consciousness as being like a subsystem within some larger network that is your physical system, then the feelings, the feelings are like a measurement of the state of the system. And so in this sense, it's like a physical measurement. So like it's an objective physical measurement of the state of the system, which tells you, your location in the space of configurations and all that. And so, the other interpretation of that phrase, speak your truth, this is the interpretation that I think it should have, because if with this interpretation, the phrase is actually quite beautiful. And that is to share your data sincerely. So if you, like we're saying just previously, like if you share your data sincerely, like the person who saw that movie goes to you and goes, you know what, this is how I think the movie is, this is how it programmed me, this is how it made me feel, I made a measurement in the space of configurations, and this is where it put me. Then, she's not trying to go to you and go, oh, what will Oyani want to hear me say about this movie? What will Oyani think? And then changing what she's communicating based off how she thinks what you want to hear. No, instead, she's speaking how she feels sincerely. And that process of speaking how you feel sincerely, as long as you're able to do the reciprocal process, which is to listen sincerely, then we can share data with each other and program each other. So like when we're communicating, we're programming each other's physical configurations. And so we are just tuning each other so that it's like, hey, this is how I really feel. This is how you really feel. When I went to go visit Jacob, and he gave me some food, when he gave me food, he's a chef. So he's trying to make a configuration of the food such that when I digest it, then it programs me to feel like, oh, this is really good. I'm enjoying this. If it programs me to feel disgusted, I don't want to tell Jacob, oh man, this was really good, because then he's going to think that process to produce that food results in the configuration of joy when it really results in the configuration of disgust. And Absolutely. So we should just be going around sincerely sharing our data with others and not be afraid of how someone will perceive, or if I say this, will this person still like me because I have this opinion or not? No, just share your data sincerely. And I think that is the responsible interpretation of the phrase "speak your truth." Phrase.
And it's exactly what we're doing on this podcast itself, because we're essentially trying to share our views, our truth, our data sincerely. Yep. And like we always say at the end of the podcast is, hey man, if you disagree, you agree, whatever, let us know. Like, I don't want to be just lost in my own mind, just pretty much just giving myself, for lack of a better word, self-fellatio.
mental hand jobs.
Yeah, like I don't want to just do that. I want, my model of reality to be, rigid enough to where I know for a fact that, it is, what's the word I'm going to use here? Where I know, if you throw something at it, it's buoyant enough to encompass all kinds of ideas. Like I want my version of reality to be accurate enough. Yeah. So that I'm not just walking around in the space of configuration, just lost in my own head.
You need to be flexible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I remember my friend Hadi Mohammadi in grad school. He used to tell me about people, because he's Iranian, and he'd tell me about people he knew that were Muslim when they were in Iran. Then they'd go to the U.S. and go to school or something like that, and they would have their first interaction with an atheist and then just completely crumble. And he said the reason why that was is because their models of reality were so rigid and stiff that whenever anything like comes up against it, like it doesn't have the ability to absorb blows, and so it just crumbles. Where he was like, I have my religious beliefs and I hear other people's opinions, but my beliefs are flexible enough to where they can actually like incorporate other people's ideas without destroying my own perception of things. And
especially when you tie a lot of your sense of self to this one idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then someone just throws something at it and it just crumbles, and you're just in this space completely lost, and you just don't even know where to start now.
Yeah.
Simply because, you've curated this version of reality that is so rigid, and
and you place your identity on it.
On it. Yeah. It's tough, man. And it's more pertinent that we start to pay attention to things like this because of how society is progressing.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
Now we're communicating faster. Now we have more ways to just imagine that we don't have to be in the same room now to kind of hook our brains up together.
No.
We could just do it on our phones. Like, think about what happened today and this week with the whole GameStop thing.
Oh, yeah,
How everybody just seemed like they were just hooked up to the same machine. And it's happening more and more now. Every week there's a new challenge.
Yeah.
This challenge, that challenge, and everybody is just, okay, I'm just going to hive mind and just do this too. Like, we're able to program ourselves quicker and more intricately now
than ever
with
before.
Technology helping us. We have to be aware of what it means to say, speak your truth, and be open to understanding that, what, I'm going to get contradictory information from this person, but I need to listen sincerely.
Yes. And we need to listen sincerely is precisely what you're saying with the connectivity that we have. We are a network. And so as a network, we construct a composite mind because we're all communicating and programming each other. So we're this network, this composite mind that programs reality based off of our communications and our connectivity. And when you're thinking about that network and you're thinking about the idea of the self, as we were saying in a previous episode, as an individual human, your resulting mind, your resulting persona is the result of many smaller living beings interacting to make a composite system. So you are, as an individual, are the result of living creatures making a composite mind. When I add another human into that, now I have two things. When they're communicating, their physical states are changing, their configurations are changing in a correlated way through the communication. So now I have a new composite mind, which is two people. If you add in a network of everyone connected through the internet and stuff like that, suddenly it's like, well, which part of this, what do I identify as the self? Because even when you're thinking about your own consciousness, like the way my model of reality, when I think about my consciousness, when I say I am Shannon, that to me is the consciousness part of me speaking. But we know that we have a subconsciousness, or what I call the consciousness complement, that also affects how the system that is the total system of Shannon, how that thing moves and functions. And so even as the consciousness part, I identify the part that says I am Shannon as a subsystem within a larger system. And when I add another human to it, now the persystem that is Shannon is a subsystem of a larger system. And so in that sense, both in the conscious sense, the consciousness is the self in that I am Shannon, but the system is the self in that we are Shannon as a composite system. But when I attach myself to a larger community, I'm still just a subsystem in a larger system. And so that is still the self. And that's and so when you view that as the self and you want to take care of the self, then you want to feed it good data, because if the network has better data, then the network is in a better position. But because the network, you identify the network as the self, then it puts yourself in a good position. So to take care of the network is to take care of the self. And so we should be going around sharing sincere data and listening to each other and just programming each other to be in better configurations.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that struck me this week was that, our podcast in itself, that's what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is we're trying to sincerely share this data, and we're doing it with, physics and mathematics and, computing and, basically the scientific method. And it's very easy for us to, take, how far we've come as a society based off of, our understanding of math, physics, and science for granted. Because we don't realize how well it's helped us predict the future.
Yeah. It's powerful.
You could wake up and just start your car and it will drive. You could wake up and push the accelerator. It's going to go faster.
Turn on your computer, record a podcast. It's going to record it. Yeah.
We just take that stuff for granted. And it was inevitable. It is inevitable that if we're going to break down what reality really means, this is the language we're going to have to do it in.
Yeah, because as a network, we're trying to program each other, and the thing about mathematics is it's a very precise language.
It's precise.
It's a high resolution language. And so so remember, like in the second episode when we're talking about simulation, we're trying to find out how do we increase computational capacity. There are two options. You either have a fixed resolution and then you just increase the mass. So now you have more mass, you have you have access to more configurations, you have more access to the conceptual space. But there was also, you could have a fixed mass and just increase the resolution. Now suddenly you have more configurations, you have more access to the conceptual space. But if you increase the mass and you increase the resolution. So because we're this network, that is the process of increasing the mass. And then if we have a precise language that we're all using, whose concepts are based in objectivity, meaning the concepts are based in ideas that are independent of any individual, then we start building a fair language and we start having a mutual shared language to program each other with. So now we've also increased the precision, and then we have access to far more configurations of the conceptual space. Now we can have higher resolution models, which can give more accurate predictions, which can help us create what we want to bring into existence.
It's a beautiful thing that we've been able to come up with this language that is so precise, and I think it's easy to just take it for granted and just kind of give in to this whole feelings thing that seems to, have taken over kind of a lot of how we communicate with each other. You hear statements like, "Oh, well, that's my opinion." It's it's like, come on, we can't go around building reality based on if everybody has an opinion, it's chaos.
Yeah. And just because someone has a lived experience doesn't mean that that has anything to do with actual reality, because human interactions are messy. Someone may say something, it gets taken the wrong way. They meant to say this, or someone said something, they don't even know what they were trying to communicate. They might have been angry, but they didn't realize. Like, it's just a whole mess to understand exactly what's being communicated at any given time. And so, there's always so much possibility for misinterpretation and confusion during any human interaction or any interaction with minds. And because of that possibility, it's important to keep an open mind that what you took from an interaction may not be objectively how it is. And we shouldn't be going around validating feelings of people like that woman, that girl in my class. Like, no one should validate this person's feelings. We can validate them in that we observe that she's in that state, and maybe we want to feed her some data so that she's in a more positive place. But we're not going to validate it as a working model of what actually happened, because she believes that it's somehow the TA's fault when she violates a policy that was created by someone who wasn't even the TA. Like, that has nothing to do with reality.
The policy was created long before you turned in that work. Like, it wasn't a situation where you created a policy as soon as she turned in the work.
Yeah.
This policy existed prior to you turning in your work, and then you're surprised it was applied to your work.
Yeah. And so we can't feed narcissism. That will lead to chaos and a breakdown of society. It just can't happen. And another thing that I wanted to say is with this idea of programming each other and the objectivity of feelings. Feelings are telling you about your location in the space of configurations. Mm-hmm. And when you're thinking about why it's important to use this mathematical language, it's because in this podcast, we're trying to communicate how we feel about reality. But we want to communicate it as clearly as possible. And so you need to increase the precision of the language that's being used. And so that's why we want to tie everything that we do to to the language of mathematics. And in mathematics, whenever you're trying to point a location in a space, you use vectors. So you have some sort of initial point, some sort of origin. And then from that origin, you can define locations in spaces. And so, because the space of configurations is an actual space, we want to, like, the basis vectors are the concepts that we want to tune. So to kind of express what a basis vector is, or what a vector space is, because if people are unfamiliar, imagine, just if you're in a room with corners. Look at a corner of the room. So let's say you're looking at a corner where
I'm looking at a corner right now, by the way.
Yeah, where the ceiling. Look at the meeting point of the ceiling and the two walls. So you look at this corner. That's the meeting point of the ceiling and two walls. And given that construction, you have a vertical line that exists where the two walls meet. So the two walls meet, create a vertical line. And then you have two horizontal lines that are parallel with the ground, where one of the walls meets the ceilings and another wall meets the ceiling. And so you have these three perpendicular or orthogonal lines that meet at that corner. So you have to treat those lines as the basis vector of the space of the room. So then imagine that in this space of the room, you want to identify any given point in that space. Well, you can just tell someone to go, all right, go down, follow the vertical line down so much, follow one of the parallel lines so much in one direction, and then follow another parallel line so much in another direction, and then that identifies the point. And so those directions, like how much you go down, how much you go, you follow, those are the coefficients of the vector space.
This is literally how pilots navigate.
Yeah, I mean, it's basic navigation 101. I mean, you have to have a vector. What's your vector, Victor?
Yeah.
But so essentially, you have to think of those lines as being the basis vectors, and then you think about how far you go in each direction as being like the coefficient. So that's how you tune. Every setting is a different location in the room, and so you can imagine there's a fly flying around the room. And then imagine that from that corner that you're using as your origin, there is always an arrow pointing from the corner to where the fly's location is. So you can imagine that this fly's buzzing around, it's flying closer to the wall, it's flying further away from the wall, it's just flying all over the place. And this arrow that's always touching the fly, that thing is shrinking in size, it's changing directions, it's moving around. That arrow is tracking the trajectory of that fly in the actual space. And so when we're communicating our model of reality, we are trying to say that these concepts that we're defining in terms of information, those are our basis vectors. And and then, how we, interpret any given situation, that's our tuning. So we're tuning the basis vectors. And so as we're communicating this to you, we're trying to tune your location in the space of configurations.
Yep.
And so if you understand the language, then you will know the same concepts and the same basis vector, so you can tune us in the same way in the space of configurations. So now we have this high precision shared language that we can use to communicate, to program and tune each other at a very intricate way, and to improve computational capacity through shared mutual information.
It's great because if you really like, if we end up building a society that leans more into these types of communication or using languages like these that are more precise, we start to have a more clear picture about, what reality is. Like, it's easy for us to discredit, it's easy for people to discredit science and discredit all of these things, but in our day-to-day lives, we rely on this so much to help us get by. And it's great that we have this podcast out and we're putting all this information out, because why can't we apply that to figuring out how we communicate? Like, why not? Yeah. For example, if you walk into a room in your house now and you flip the switch, the same switch you flipped a few minutes ago, you flip it and then the light doesn't come on.
Yeah.
You walk in that room with that thought in your head that once I flip this switch, it wasn't even a question that it won't come on.
Yeah,
you just knew if I flip this switch, like if you do it and the light doesn't come on, now you're wondering, okay, let me go check another room to see if the power's out. Did I pay my bill?
Yeah.
Why can't we apply this types of approach to just figuring out what reality is, and, our feelings and where we are? And I think that is overall the purpose of this podcast, and what we are trying to communicate with people is we are trying to develop, a community or a group of people, eventually a society that leans on these precise languages. To develop our models of reality.
Yeah. And the great thing about it is, whenever you're in this network of this shared network with other people and other minds, you never have to be perfect. No one has to be perfect. It is guaranteed that
you could be wrong.
Huh?
You can be wrong.
You can be wrong. Yeah. It is guaranteed that you are going to interact with someone who knows more about you than something. Someone's going to be better at you than something. So in other words, you're always going to be having interactions in which you're the person who's higher on the hierarchy of some information processing game. Whatever skill, whatever profession you're in, consider that like an information processing game. And then there's a hierarchy of people, like someone who just started off is going to be at the bottom because they just started off. You're a neophyte. You got to start and work your way up. And in these hierarchies, they're given the set of all information processing games that can be played. You're going to be at the bottom of that hierarchy more often than not when you interact with somebody. And if someone who sees you and sees you bumbling around and messing up, and they see, what you're doing wrong, they should just be feeding you data so that you get a little bit better, because now the network as a whole is better at playing that game. Yep. And so that's why I like the phrase that I came up with. It's nobody has to be perfect because we're perfect together. And so as long as we're sincerely sharing data and communicating with each other and tuning each other such that everyone is in a better position, then, the likelihood that we'll be able to continue predicting the future as a system and be able to create and bring into reality what we want, that just increases and improves.
Yeah, it really does. And this is something that I really hope that a lot of people will take away from this podcast, from this episode rather, is, the idea that, speak your truth is a very powerful, phrase. There's so much meaning packed into it. But I guess here on the Bottom Total podcast, we want to rephrase it by saying, hey, speak your truth, but be ready to listen sincerely.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. Oh yeah,
Just be ready to listen sincerely.
there was one thing I wanted to add. With that description of the conceptual space in terms of vectors. So, the fact that our models of reality, your model of reality depends on the physical settings of your system. So, if you have different physical settings, then you believe something else, then you model reality differently. And so when you're trying to break down someone's worldview, you can break it down in terms of a set of basis vectors and their coefficients to indicate a location in the space of configurations. And so when you look at it that way, all this stuff that we're communicating can all be discussed using the language of vectors. So it is vectors all the way down. So and so that's the thing is like, and that's the thing with this podcast. This is not the only symmetry. When you get information processing where it's vectors all the way down, there are so many symmetries. And it's like we were talking about in the episode of when X then Y because of Z. When you have the input X and you have the output Y, and then you have the context Z. It's not as though there's just one Z that explains how X goes to Y. There are many languages and ways to conceptualize what X is, what Y is, and how they go from one to the other. But if these things are all describing the same thing, then there should be a symmetry between all of them. And so that box, the Z, is like a worldview. And and the more symmetries you can put in that box that all say the same thing in a different way, then the more dynamics you have in the space of configurations of conceptualizing things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, so I think we're gonna probably just end it right there.
Yeah, that's probably a good point to stop.
But I really like that we're starting to get into more of the application of some of the ideas that we've been talking about for a couple of episodes back, because just watching, like we're talking to each other earlier in the week, just watching, society evolve and just watching how our communication is getting to be more intricate, and, the coronavirus thing kind of accelerated that process because now we're spending more and more time online, so our communication is getting faster, and we need some precision. In the system. Like it's necessary for us to start to understand, what truth means and what it means to listen sincerely and be objective, how valid your feelings are. We need to start to pay more attention to this, because the internet and the level of communication that we have right now, it's like a powder keg. It's like you've given us fire. And if you fire is great, it warms you up, it cooks your food, but you have to watch it. You have to know what you're doing with it. So we have all of this power now. We should start to pay more attention to it. And I think statements like speak your truth and being able to break that statement down and kind of understand what it really means, that it doesn't necessarily mean, I feel it, so it's valid. That's not what he means.
That's
what he
narcissism.
means is, that is narcissism right there. And
just straight up.
We don't want to indulge that. And, like we say every week, guys, if you agree with us, let us know. If you disagree, please let us know.
Yeah, please.
We need all that information.
We need that data. And so far, the feedback we've been getting has been very encouraging. I want to shout out to that dude on Reddit that we met, because we started posting stuff on Reddit.
Oh, yeah.
That one interaction with that guy, and he was really getting it. I think he's also a physics. He's also a physicist, and was a human rambler. What's his name?
It's interesting because he sounds like he is in the place I was. A couple of years ago, when I was trying to figure out what all this means. So it's really great, the communications that we're getting, the feedback we're getting from people on the internet. It's great, man.
Yeah. Well, him and my cousin Kathy, she's my mom's first cousin, so she's about the same age as my mom. She also was enthusiastic, wow. and what I like the most about their communications is, we have a goal of how this language should program people. And when someone comes back and it's like, yeah, it made me feel this way, it made me think this, and it's like, that's exactly what I wanted you to feel. It's like the language is doing what I hoped it would do, what we predicted it would do. And not only that, but when they then communicate their interpretation and what they think, and they start using the language, and they start playing the information games, because we're inviting you to play our information games. Here are the rules, here how things work, and then here's how you program each other, here's what all this stuff means. And those interactions I've had with them have started making me think of stuff I didn't think of before. So now I'm already getting this positive data back, and it's just Yeah.
That's the whole point. That is the point, because we are open to, you know, understanding that, you know, we don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
We're just trying to figure it out, and we want that at the very least the basis of whatever we're doing, the language we're using, it should be precise enough to where there's very little data loss.
Yeah, exactly. We're just speaking our truth. That's all we're doing. Yeah.
So it is. So if you agree or disagree, do let us know. We are on social media. Twitter, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We don't really do much stuff on Twitter.
Nah, not on Twitter. I don't know. Something about Twitter rubs me the wrong way. But we should definitely get into that more. But yeah, we do post quite a bit on Instagram, and we're getting into Reddit a lot. So we're growing. If you like the podcast, please recommend it to your friends. Yes, please
share it and let people know. Other than that, anything else you want to add, Shannon?
Just one thing. Stay turtling, my friends.
Stay turtling, my friends. All right. I love it. All right, guys. Catch you guys next week.
Peace.